October of 2018 was a milestone for us here at the Wildlife Department as we moved back into our recently renovated headquarters here in Oklahoma City. Now, this is the lobby of this beautiful new building. It just so happens that another milestone was set exactly 100 years ago in October of 1918. It was the establishment of our very first public area, the Mccurtain County Wilderness Area. And although much has changed over the last century, well, in comparison, the Mccurtain County Wilderness Area has purposefully changed very little. It was first established as a game reserve to help nurture back struggling populations of white-tailed deer and wild turkeys. Over the decades, as those species began to respond to management, another species began to take the center stage for our biologists, the endangered red cockaded woodpecker.
I generally climb about 120 trees. About every 6 to 8 weeks, I have 120 trees to climb. Sometimes it gets old climbing a woodpecker tree and getting stung by red wasps or getting peed on by flying squirrels. But at the same time, it is a very unique job.
Meet wildlife biologist Clay Barnes. For Clay, just another day at the office takes on a whole different meaning. Oftentimes, his office is 30 feet up in the air in a pine tree. Clay works and lives on the Mccurtain County Wilderness Area, and his main responsibility is to observe and manage for the red cockaded woodpeckers on the area.
The red cockaded woodpecker is found here on the Mccurtain County Wilderness Area. It's the only location where it's still known to exist in Oklahoma. I love living here. It's absolutely beautiful, but it can be a pain. It seems like every time it rains, I've learned over the years, if you're gonna go somewhere and it rained through the night, you better drive the roads first, because there's a good chance there's gonna be a tree or at least a big branch that's gonna have to be cut out of the road. But I don't know how many times I've been dressed for church or dressed to go somewhere and I get up the road and I've got to run a chainsaw in my good clothes. I mean, I know that sounds like I'm complaining. When you look around this area and you see where I get to live here, most people are like, I'd give anything to live here, but I really like this part of the country, and it's just a beautiful part of our state. Love it here.
In the far southeast corner of Oklahoma, you'll find one of the most stunning, rugged landscapes our state has to offer. With nearly 2,000 square miles of forest, streams, lakes, and wildlife, this is Mccurtain County, home to an abundance of outdoor activities for hunters, anglers, and outdoor enthusiasts. It's also home to the Mccurtain County Wilderness Area, located adjacent to Broken Bow Reservoir and the Ouachita National Forest. This 14,000-acre wilderness is the oldest Department of Wildlife Management area, established in 1918. The wilderness area contains the largest contiguous tract of old-growth, short-leaf pine forest in the country, ideal habitat for the red cockaded woodpecker.
The red cockaded woodpecker is a federally endangered species. It was listed in 1970. It's endangered due to loss of habitat. It was traditionally found all throughout the southeast part of the United States.
The red cockaded woodpecker is the only woodpecker that excavates its cavity in a live pine tree, preferably old pine trees that are about 80 years old or older. Since the late 1800s, large tracts of old-growth pine forest throughout the South have been cut for timber harvest, replanted, and cut again on harvest rotations, resulting in the loss of the old pine trees that are suitable for the red cockaded woodpecker.
The Mccurtain County Wilderness Area is the largest contiguous tract of native shortleaf pine, and that is why we still have the red cockaded woodpecker at this location. It's the habitat that they need. The old growth shortleaf pine, a lot of it is deeply infected with red heart fungus, which is what the red cockaded woodpecker requires in order to build its roost cavities. It takes them 8 months to a year, sometimes longer, to bore into those living trees. As they go through those layers, they will hit that heartwood, and it's deeply infected with that fungus, and it makes excavation easier. The reason they use a live tree is because it will still exude resin. So as these birds bore into the tree, it starts to try to heal itself and exude resin. Well, in the healing process, that resin flows and flows and flows. They will actually wound the tree all around their cavity entrance to create resin flow, and they call it candling. After a while, it looks like where a candle has overflowed as it's burned and run all down the tree, and it acts as a barrier to keep rat snakes from being able to climb the tree, the black rat snake, from being able to climb the tree and get in there to get the birds, the chicks, or the eggs.
The Mccurtain County Wilderness Area has a population of about 40 to 50 red cockaded woodpeckers that live in about 14 different family groups, and managing for them is a year-round job. In the early spring, Clay and his technicians spend much of their time traversing the area, checking woodpecker cavities using a Peeper cam. They're looking for active clusters, which are groups of cavity trees a family of woodpeckers are actively using. Using the Peeper cam, biologists can see if a cavity is occupied with a bird, and more importantly, if the bird has laid eggs.
This doesn't happen often where I actually catch a bird in the cavity. Usually they'll flush at my arrival, but she's actually got at least one egg laid, and obviously she's got it on her mind to lay another because she didn't flush when we came up. I'm looking for 4. When I have 4, I'll count 11 days. And in just 11 days, I should have chicks. And then in 7 days, I'll climb this tree and pull those chicks out, and we'll put number bands on however many actually hatch out.
After identifying all active clusters, biologists revisit the nesting cavities after the eggs have hatched. When the chicks are about 7 days old, biologists capture the chicks and place colored leg bands on each one for future identification.
We're here at cluster 5 on the east side, and we had 3 fresh hatched chicks on the 22nd. So today's the 29th. They should be 7 days old. So we're going to climb up the tree and hopefully be able to get them pulled out and bring them down and put bands on them. I caught 2, and there sounds like there's one more here. And he quit talking, so I must have him. Yeah. These guys are good and healthy, and they're begging real big, so it makes them a little easier to catch. They've really got their little heads up. I've caught all these by the head. So They're really poking their little heads up there trying to get Mama to come and feed them. Yeah, they're right at a week old, but you can see they're pretty hardy. So So we just banded these chicks. We added number bands on the left foot with one color band, and on the right foot we added orange over black on this one. The sequence was orange over a different, each bottom color was different this year, but those color bands makes them identifiable when they get older. If during the fall we do trapping, and when I catch this bird, I can look at those bands and the number bands, and I know right where it was born. If we happen to catch it even on the east side of the or west side of the lake or something, or a couple miles from here, we'll know how old it was by those bands, or it is by those bands, and where it was born and all that. So one of the neat landmarks on the Mccurtain County Wilderness area, this is actually on the west side of the area, is this old chimney. It's one of the only remaining standing structures from the CCC camps that were here in 1932-ish, or right around that time. The CCC camps were work programs through the government to help these rural communities have a way to make money and to survive out here. One thing I think is neat is these guys were really good craftsmen. I mean, that's a pretty neat chimney in my opinion. They used the natural quartz rocks that found all around this area. They built a lot of the bridges. That was part of their job. They constructed a lot of the old roads that are in here. They built fences. They were hard workers. There's obvious signs of the camp here. It's just so grown up right now, it's hard to see. Just a neat landmark, neat feature. One of the more notable landmarks on the wilderness area, it's, I've always heard it referred to as the old trapper's cabin. Apparently, in the late 20s, this cabin was constructed, and there was a state contracted trapper that came through here fairly regular and did trapping in here, and he would stay at this cabin. This old cabin sits on Linson Creek, and it's one of the most beautiful creeks in the state, if you ask me. Of course, I'm pretty partial. I've been here a long time, so it's held together really well. You'll see that we keep it swept out and cleaned up around it, just in case there was a wildfire. Don't want to lose it, because like I said, it's just a really little neat piece of history on the wilderness area here. Part of the management we will do in the fall, we will start trapping. We're trying to trap, hopefully we'll catch the young of the year that we banded earlier, and that way we know that they did make it to subadults. And if they're unbanded, we will add color bands at that time. If they're already have their color bands and their aluminum number bands, we'll just take a note of that just for documentation. So right now we're preparing these nets to make sure they're at the right height, because in the morning we're going to be doing this well before daylight, and it'll be done in the dark. So we come out the day before, get these poles set at the right height where the entrance cavity is right there in the center of our trap nets. And in the morning when we come out, you have to go real quiet and easy. So this is just making sure that we're at the right height right now. We got here and we snuck in real quietly, and we got our traps set up. We're able to use some light now. There's a net. net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. And we're able to use some light now. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here. You can see it. There's a net set up right here This is an insert tree. It's not a natural cavity. We were able to get the net raised up without flushing the bird. And now it's just a waiting game until daylight. Sometimes they'll flush as soon as we get the net set up. Luckily these stayed put. So right around daylight, they'll start to flush and we'll catch the birds. And if they need bands, we'll put bands on them. Otherwise, we'll record what bands they have on them. So that's where we're at right now. Another 30 minutes or so, maybe a little longer. We generally always catch the breeding male, the breeding female. We're hoping to catch the young of the year that we banded like in May and late April or early May. That way we know that they have made it to young subadults. Hey, 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 easy. Hey, 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 that hurts. So sometimes because of the resin flow from the trees and all that, they get a lot of resin caked up and you have to kind of scrape it away. You can see the red on the male right here. That's the only red you'll see on them. When they're a chick, they'll have a red dot here, but it dissipates.
Not all research on the red cockaded woodpecker involves handling the actual birds. For effective management decisions, well, it's important to take a step back and look at the big picture and understand as much as we can about the habitat these little birds call home.
So what I'm doing out here today is collecting data on trees that woodpeckers occupy to try to figure out kind of what attributes woodpeckers are looking for when they select a tree. I'm gathering information on both trees that are currently active. When I say active, it means that woodpeckers have a cavity in the tree and they're using the tree either to lay eggs or roost in. Then I'm also selecting unused trees nearby for a comparison. So this right here has been and traditionally been an active tree here. You can see we've got the flashing on here to prevent snakes from climbing the tree trunk to protect the woodpecker cavity. And so the first measurement I'm going to take is diameter. This is called diameter or breast height. So it's typically averages about 4.5 feet above the ground or kind of wherever your chest is. And this will give you a diameter measurement at this level. You know, despite intensive management out here on the Mccurtain County Wilderness Area for the red cockaded woodpecker, you know, the population has remained relatively small. So since about the mid-1990s, it's been probably between 40 and 50 individual birds. And so we're trying to figure out how to increase the population out here. And so that is kind of the driver and the primary reason for my study out here, is to try to figure out, you know, how do we figure out, you know, what trees woodpeckers are selecting for, which could help inform management in the future. So I'm going to use this instrument. These are called laser calipers, and I'm going to use these to measure the diameter of the tree at the cavity entrance. And so this is the next measurement I'm taking on red cockaded woodpecker cavity trees, and you can see I've got 2 green dots here, which are my lasers, and I can stretch this out. This will allow me to get the diameter of the tree from really kind of any point along the trunk, which is pretty useful. And so what I will typically do is I'll kind of line these up, and I'll go up the cavity entrance. Several of these trees are hundreds of years old, and so because of that, obviously age is not a limiting factor out here. There are a suitable amount of mature trees out here for woodpeckers to occupy. And so that's another reason why I felt like, you know, this study had merit, because trying to figure out, you know, aside from tree age, what other factors are limiting on red cockaded woodpeckers down here at the wilderness area. So for my next measurement, I'm going to use this device, which is called a laser hypsometer, to obtain different height measurements off this pine tree. And so the tricky part here is finding a good angle where I can see the entire tree, including the very top of it. And so basically what this thing does is it gives me 3 readings and kind of calculates the triangulation and gives me the height pretty simply. And so the first measurement I'll do is I'll do height to the cavity, and then I will do height to basically where the crown starts, so where the leafy green vegetation starts on the tree, and then I'll do a total height of the tree, which I'll try to get the very top of the crown. So the next thing I'm going to use, this is called an increment borer, and it will pull out a tree core that we can later use to age the tree. And so this is our active red cockaded woodpecker cavity tree. And so kind of start drilling this in here. Kind of at a slight angle, so you can kind of push on it. And you want to try to get all the way into the center of the tree. That way you can account for all the rings whenever you eventually use it for aging. So this one's going in really good. Basically, it's a tool that will pull out basically kind of like a long straw-shaped piece of wood, and you can count the rings on that straw that will give you an estimated age for the tree. And you can really see some of that heart rot that fungus causes in these trees, which is what makes these cavity trees usable by red cockaded woodpeckers. So then I will store the core in one of these paper straws. Oops, drop that part. Put it in there like so. So hopefully with the results of this study, it can help us you know, to manage the habitat out here on the Mccurtain County Wilderness Area. So for example, if we know that like a tree with certain attributes is more desirable for a red cockaded woodpecker, we can potentially identify those trees before they are occupied, you know, within a cluster or outside of a cluster, and we can make sure to keep those trees remain standing if we're trying to ever do, like, you know, selective thinning out here to maintain that open mid-story habitat for the red cockaded woodpecker. As the State Wildlife Agency, it is our responsibility to manage and recover rare and declining species like the red cockaded woodpecker, and especially because it is on the state-owned Mccurtain County Wilderness Area. And so this species is an important part of the state's biodiversity. It is an indicator species for the shortleaf pine forest. And essentially the population declined because of humans and because of widespread habitat loss.
With over a century of wildlife management success, the Mccurtain County Wilderness Area is something that all Oklahoma sportsmen can be proud of. Now, because it was set aside as a wilderness area, and because of the sensitivity of the management for the woodpeckers, public access is very limited. Just be sure to consult the Oklahoma hunting regulations for more information. There's plenty of other species on the area that our biologists manage for, but it's always balanced with what will also benefit the endangered red cockaded woodpecker.